All right, so welcome everyone. This is a workshop, a UCR library workshop about using Zotero for citation management. So thanks for being here. As I mentioned, this is being recorded. So before we get started today, I do want to take a few minutes and just call attention to the fact that we are living through multiple crises. So I want to acknowledge that this pandemic that we're living through, as well as other ongoing structural inequalities, have disproportionately affected people of color, particularly Black and Indigenous people. So as a member of the UCR community, I stand with Asian American, and Pacific Islander communities, as well as Black Lives Matter, against xenophobia, racism, sexism, and other human rights violations that have been taking place. I also want to recognize, because I'm physically located in Riverside, California, our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, as well as their ancestors and descendants. And while we are currently meeting virtually, wherever you're calling in from, I do invite you to learn whose lands you're located on at the website on the screen, native-land.ca. So definitely for today, feel free to engage however you're comfortable. I'll again be monitoring chat. So to introduce myself, my name is Rachel Starry. I am the Digital Scholarship Librarian here at UC Riverside Library. And we'll be looking today briefly at kind of what citation management is, what Zotero is, and how to get started using it to do citation management to help kind of organize and annotate your research, as well as generate bibliographies as you're writing. So if you are, I'm curious to kind of hear if you're new to using Zotero, if you are new to doing citation management, maybe where you're coming from, if you are coming from a particular discipline or research area, or again, if you have specific questions, definitely feel free to throw those in chat as well. But glad to have you all here today. And I'll make an effort to keep an eye on chat, and if folks share specific questions as we're going along, then I will do my best to answer them if they are kind of quick to answer. If folks have more complex questions, if there's time at the end, we can definitely talk about specific things. Yeah, I will share a link as well in one of the final slides to kind of get in touch with us if you have questions to follow up. Always happy to follow up as well if we don't cover everything today that you're kind of here to learn about. So thanks, folks are sharing in the chat. Yeah, some of you are totally new to Zotero, new to reference management, coming from different fields. Some of you have used different tools besides Zotero. So we will kind of talk very briefly about how Zotero compares to some of the other tools that are out there. Not all of them exhaustively, but yeah, so this is an introductory workshop. So we'll kind of just spend the first half of this workshop kind of talking generally about what citation management is and maybe why you want to do it. And then we'll actually look at the Zotero interface itself and how to get stuff, your research materials in and out of Zotero. So doing citation management can definitely help save time and some of those headaches down the road. It helps you do a lot of your storing and organizing kind of in one place, centralizing your materials. We'll look at a couple of different ways to use the Zotero browser integrations to automatically import citations as you're doing research online. And there's also all kinds of plugins for different word processing softwares, as well as Google Docs to help automatically kind of generate your bibliography. So you're not spending hours and hours doing that, works cited section at the end of your kind of papers. I also kind of want to call attention, because we all have different systems that we're using. Maybe you've used different, reference management software. Some of you have shared that in the chat in the past. It's really never too late to start using a citation manager or to switch to Zotero. So we're actually going to look at several different ways to get your current research materials in. If you have, for example, Word documents with lots of citations in them, or if you have a really robust kind of PDF library on your computer, we'll look at ways to get all those sorts of materials into Zotero. So to kind of also take a step back before we look at this particular tool, just want to think through, why is this a tool that we want, that, we here at UCR Library teach or, recommend folks use? So there are really two primary reasons why I really like Zotero and why I prefer to teach with it. And one is that it is a really robust tool that is easy to use. It has a really simple and flexible user interface. So it has a really low learning curve. And the other main reason is that it is an open source software. So that means several things. It means it's free to use, that you will have access to it, regardless of your institutional situation. So it also uses open citation standards. So you can both access the software, and if you build a library of your own reference materials, you'll be able to access that after you leave UCR. You're not going to lose access to this software. It also has both desktop local capabilities, as well as a version that you can just access through Zotero.org. And you have the option to use one or both of those. So you can, if you choose to create a free account with Zotero.org and do what's called syncing your library across with the cloud, essentially, then you'll be able to access your citations anywhere, really, from any different computer, and to sync across multiple devices. So if you have, your work desktop and you have your laptop that travels with you, etc. You can also opt to not do that at all. You can just use it locally. It does not require an internet connection to create your local citation library and access those citations as you're doing your writing. So very briefly, and this isn't an exhaustive list of the other sorts of software that are out there. I know some folks mentioned RefWorks in chat, but how does Zotero, this open source tool, compare to some of the other software that's out there, some of the other citation managers? So EndNote's one of the really common ones. So EndNote does, it is a proprietary product produced by the company called Clarivate Analytics, and it does a lot of the same things that Zotero does. So it has both desktop and browser versions. One of the kind of negatives, drawbacks to this, of course, is that it is an expensive software. So if it's not, if you don't get access to it, for example, through your institution, through your department, it can be really kind of cost prohibitive for students, especially to buy. So one of the nice things that EndNote does do that Zotero does not do is that it supports editing and annotating your PDFs right in the tool. So with Zotero, you have to kind of do that separately. You have to have another software that allows you to do that. But otherwise, they're fairly comparable. So PaperPile is available, actually, if you are a researcher or student here at UCR, it's available through UCR Library. And this is a great tool if you are a heavy Google Doc user and you primarily do most of your kind of research and writing using Google Docs and Google Drive. So it has slightly easier syncing with if you keep all your materials in Google Drive. It's also it's a subscription service. So if you don't have access to it, if you're not like a researcher here at UCR getting access to it through us, it's a subscription service. So it's, I think, $10 a month currently. It's also an online tool. So it's not easy to kind of access your citation library without an internet connection if you're using PaperPile. And then another really commonly used citation manager is Mendeley. So this one is like Zotero. It has a version that is free to use. So there's basic functionality. On the other hand, there's a lot of kind of drawbacks related to the fact that this is also proprietary software produced by Elsevier. So one of the, there's all these little kind of add-ons so you can gain additional functionality with higher paid tiers. So you can, for example, also use Mendeley like Zotero to collaborate with others and do shared group libraries. But there are additional charges for kind of collaborating in larger groups. It also forces you to use cloud storage versus with Zotero, you have that option to just keep things totally local with no accounts or internet connection needed. And I have a reference here. Wikipedia actually has a great comparison of reference management software page. So I recommend checking that out if you're curious to, again, how these different tools kind of compare. So to kind of sum up before we actually look at Zotero itself, some of Zotero's unique features include this flexibility. So you have the option to use it without creating any kind of account, just totally locally on your computer to store one citation library on one device. You also have the option to create a free account with Zotero.org and sync your library across devices and access your citations anywhere by logging into Zotero.org. Zotero allows you to kind of participate in an unlimited number of both public and private groups. So you can share, create shared libraries with other researchers and collaborate on citation libraries. It also enables the full text searching of PDFs and, for example, notes that you bring in. So it's a really great kind of place to centralize your research materials and kind of search things. So in fact, I use Zotero when I'm doing research to have everything in one place, because it's, as you're writing, you often have that moment of like, where did I read that one line, or who said this? If you keep everything in one place, such as Zotero, and it has this full text searching capability, you can kind of more easily figure out where you read something. And then finally, Zotero works on all the major operating systems. So regardless of what kind of computer you have, you should be able to use this software. And it has connectors to all of the major internet browsers. So I'm currently using Firefox, and I'll demonstrate using this with the Firefox extension, but you can also use, you can find extensions for Chrome, Safari, and Edge, as well as plugins to lots of other software. So when we kind of turn to looking at using Zotero and getting your stuff in and out, Zotero also has many word processor integrations. So when it comes time to write, depending on where you like to do your drafting and creating of your manuscripts, there are word processor integrations for Microsoft Word, for LibreOffice, as well as for Google Docs. And if you happen to use LaTeX or other kind of plain text editors to put together your research, there's also a lot of other plugins and integrations that are built with Zotero. And this is partly related to the fact that it is open source software. So there's a huge community of people building out these tools and making this tool work with other software. So how do you get Zotero to start using it? So you can go to zotero.org to download it. Again, it is free to use. And actually, there's kind of two components to it if you do want to be using the browser plugin to kind of automatically pull in materials. So you'll want to go to zotero.org and download both the desktop software itself for your computer. So it will automatically detect when you go to the download page what kind of computer you're using. So I'm using a Windows PC, so it's detected that. This is a screenshot that I took the other day. And I'm also using Firefox. So if you're using Chrome, it will automatically detect that. If you're using, for example, Safari on a Mac, it will point you to the correct place to download those particular versions of the software. So it's, again, two components, the software itself, as well as the browser connector that's going to let you import things more easily. Apologies. So yeah, as I mentioned, there are lots of different ways to get items into Zotero. And we'll look at a bunch of these in detail, but I kind of wanted to, again, just go through some of the ways that it's kind of easy to get whatever your current system of organizing citations is and kind of transition to using Zotero or another citation manager. So Zotero allows you to, if you have that browser plugin installed, pull in the bibliographic metadata, all those pieces of information that form a citation or a reference. If you are browsing a library catalog, an online database, apologies, I'm already losing my voice a little bit. Of course, if you're on the UCR library catalog, you will be able to pull things in automatically. Any of the databases that we provide access to through UCR or other databases, for example, JSTOR, other websites. One of the nice things that actually Zotero does that some of the other reference managers do not do is allow you to kind of create local snapshots of any web page. So you can really create citations for all kinds of resources, even if they're not the stereotypical book, article, standard kind of research resource. You can also bring Zotero directly from your own computer. So if you do have, for example, folders of PDFs, you can drag and drop them right into Zotero, and Zotero will go and search for the metadata associated with them. If, for example, this only really works if you downloaded that PDF from a library catalog or a database that associated bibliographic information and embedded that in the PDF. If it's something that you scanned yourself, it's probably not going to find any information for that. And if you have your research materials, for example, in different places, like on an external hard drive or in Google Drive or other cloud storage, you can actually link to those materials to make it kind of easier to find. All right, I have all my citations here in Zotero, and I'm also linking out to them, the actual PDFs, wherever they live in your kind of research workflow. There's even more ways beyond beyond the kind of getting stuff from your computer and using the browser extension, which we'll look at. You can actually search for sources if you know the identifier. There is a magic wand button in Zotero, which we'll look at, which will let you search for and bring in automatically the information for a resource by its DOI or its ISBN if it's a book, and other unique identifiers. There's also a really wonderful, and I mentioned this here because we probably won't have time to look at it in detail later, but it's a tool called anystyle.io. So this is actually a fantastic tool, for example, if you have a bunch of citations listed in a Word document or just in a plain text document, or if you wanted to copy into your Zotero library, all the work cited in a particular paper, if you're copying from a PDF or from some other format, right, digital format. So what it's going to do is you can copy and paste in, just plain text references, and it is a tool that is going to try and parse out all those different pieces of information to segment it and detect, this is the author of this citation, this is the title, this is the date, and then save that in a format that Zotero can read, that's machine readable. So this is a really fantastic tool to try if you do have kind of plain text bibliographies. You want to just try and automatically get into Zotero. And I actually talk about this a little bit more in the workshop recording for the advanced Zotero workshop that we offered last year. So actually on the library website, is this the tab? Yes. So you can actually go over to YouTube, and we have a UCR library account on YouTube. And this is the playlist of all the workshops that we've offered and recorded in the past year, including one for advanced features in Zotero, including I talk about anystyle.io there. And we also have some other kind of introductory Zotero workshops, particularly if you're using Zotero for archival materials. So I just wanted to kind of call that out as well. And then as a kind of last resort, you can always manually enter a source citation. But what I kind of wanted to get across with listing all these different ways you can get stuff in is that there's really, this is a last resort, right? So there's so many other automatic ways to get citations into Zotero. You can always add and create references manually, but you don't need to kind of worry if I'm just getting started using Zotero, that's not going to be your go-to, is entering things manually. And then, of course, there are lots of ways to get citations and bibliographies out of Zotero. And one of the main benefits of using a citation manager to not only store all your materials, but, for example, there are so many different citation styles. Inside of Zotero, you can actually select from thousands of different citation styles or create your own if you're working with, a thesis that has to be formatted, your citations have to be formatted just so, or, if different journals require different citation styles, you can easily export your references in a number of different citation styles without having to do that extra work of formatting them yourself. You can really copy and paste citations easily in and out of Zotero, but you can also kind of create robust bibliographies from a long list of sources. So it's really flexible. And of course, I did mention earlier, there are a variety of different word processor plugins. So if you download the, for example, plugin for Microsoft Word or for Google Docs, that's going to enable you to insert citations and kind of automatically generate works cited sections if you're using those particular writing tools. And then one other kind of really fantastic related resource that I want to call attention to is called Zotero Bib. So that is accessible at zbib.org. And what this is kind of a light version of Zotero. So if you just need to really quickly generate a bibliography and you don't want to worry about manually applying a citation style, you can use Zotero Bib to create a bibliography super quickly. So it'll allow you to kind of search for materials and then add it to a bibliography. You can also copy and paste and then easily get that bibliography out in a couple of different ways. So this is also a nice tool from the creators of Zotero. Okay, so at this point, I want to transition over and actually look at the Zotero interface. But before we do that, I did want to call attention to the fact that we're recording this. So this workshop recording will be made available. And again, I mentioned there are other past workshop recordings. If we don't cover something today, again, feel free to ask questions in chat if you have really specific questions or if you'd like clarification on anything that I'm going over. But we also have the other workshop recordings available on the library's YouTube page. Let me just double check very quickly that I'm not missing any questions in chat. Okay, yep, folks have interest in particular things that we're about to look at, so that is fantastic. All right, so for the next 20 minutes or so, I want to kind of walk through and do some demystifying of this particular tool interface, as well as talk about some ways of getting materials in or demonstrating ways of getting materials into Zotero and then back out by generating bibliographies automatically. So essentially the Zotero interface, which is what I have up on the screen right now, is divided into three main panes. So on the left-hand side, we have the libraries and collections pane. And yeah, just seeing a note in chat, I'm using a PC, so it will look a little bit different if you're using a Mac or even like the Linux version. But most of the differences are just cosmetic. They're not functional. So hopefully everything that we look at today is applicable across platforms. But if you have any questions or get confused, let me know. So on the left-hand side here, we have a list of all of the different folders or collections, which is the term that Zotero uses, of materials that I have in my citation library. So everyone gets one library, just one library for yourself, but you can create as many folders as you want within your library. So you can create a new folder. There's a little button up here, and I'll use the term folder and collection kind of interchangeably. So there's a new collection button up here. You can also kind of, if you go into an existing collection, you can right click and create additional sub collections. So you can nest these folders and do, just like you would in your kind of, standard way of file organizing, organize your materials into lots of different nested folders. So that can be really helpful for organization. So yeah, very easy to create new folders within other folders, and then they will just appear as nested. Nothing will automatically be copied into a new folder when you create it, but it's very easy to move things around. So that is essentially, this is the libraries and collections pane, so that's where those are all going to appear. You'll also notice I have something called group libraries. So I am a member, so I'm logged in. I have a free account with Zotero.org, and I have joined a bunch of different group libraries. So those will appear here, and you can choose which libraries you want to kind of sync stuff from to your particular computer. So some of these I have syncing and some I have it turned off. So this is the libraries and collections pane. Then the bulk of what you'll be looking at in the middle of the interface is the items, item display pane. So it's this might be an outdated reference, but I like to talk about it in terms of it's similar to something like iTunes or other software that helps you organize video or audio or things like that. So all of the different items that you have in a given library or collection will appear here in the central pane and all of the details. And this is customizable. So you can choose which fields you want to show up in this pane. I have it set to show the title, the creator, the year, and then date modified. So I can see when I last modified this citation. I'm currently looking at my entire Zotero library, which has over 1,600 items in it. But of course, we can kind of click through and you can organize materials really any way that makes sense to you that works for your process. And items are stored as different types of items. So different types of items, and then that brings us to kind of this third pane over here on the right-hand side, will have different details associated with them, right? So this that I have clicked on right here is a book chapter. It's got this little icon that looks like an open book. And this item type, or it's book section rather than book chapter, has these particular metadata fields, or citation information associated with it. So we have an author for the actual contribution, as well as book editors or series editors. There's a variety of different kinds of editing fields you can include in here. Of course, the book title, the actual title of the chapter, series information, etc. So that's all stored over here in the items details pane. Apologies if you hear my cat in the background. He's having, as I said earlier, serious allergy issues, which I can certainly relate to. So also over here on the right-hand side in this item details pane, there's a couple other tabs up here. You don't have to worry about these too much, but you can create essentially sticky notes. You can just add text notes to any citation that you have in here. So if I add a note here, it's going to have this little icon for a sticky note. You get a little plain, text editor in here, which you can even kind of, format a little bit. So this is just a note. And yeah, then you can basically attach notes to any citation, and you can kind of move them around. This is a fantastic way, and these are searchable. So if you, for example, are taking notes on a book, you can, for example, wherever you take your notes, you don't have to do it within Zotero, but if you copy and paste your notes into Zotero, then that's kind of, it adds to that search capabilities, right? So you'll be able to easily, again, if you have a note on something, kind of find where you read something, or really, it's super flexible. You can also attach files to citations. So this is the actual citation item, again, with these details. But it has a PDF attached to it. And that you can do with any kind of file. So you can attach image files, really your own Word documents, whatever you want to attach to any given citation. And yeah, it's very easy to kind of move things around too. So if I wanted to bring this item and move it into that little subfolder that I created earlier, you can just literally drag and drop. So now this item will also appear in this subfolder. And if you're curious about where things live, for example, if you are in your main library and you're trying to remember where a particular citation is in your organizational system, you can, so on PC, you can hold down the control key. So I'm holding down the control key. Where is it? It should appear. That's odd. It's possible I don't have that filed anywhere. Is this one filed anywhere? Oh, okay, there we go. Finally found this. So this article, which of course has a slightly different icon, I held down control, and then over in the left-hand sidebar, all the folders where this item appears will be highlighted in yellow. So that's really useful to kind of see where something lives if you're looking at your library view. Let's see, other things about this interface. Any questions so far about the interface? Thank you so much for pointing that out in the chat, Linda, that the cursor is white, so it's not super easy to see as I'm moving across. I will try and move my cursor more slowly. Thank you for pointing that out. And if you need me to verbally explain where I'm pointing to at any given point, please let me know. I will try and verbalize that. So the left-hand sidebar, again, is where all these libraries, all your folders, live, and different libraries. You can also see Zotero will flag items if it thinks that you've entered the same item twice. It will flag that and put it over here on the left-hand side in duplicate items. And then you can choose whether to collapse them and merge them. Or it will also tell you if you have not filed anything, which is really nice. I have apparently not filed a lot of things in my own Zotero library. All right, so let's look really briefly at actually bringing things into Zotero. So I'm going to go over to the library website. So if you search, for example, in the library website and want to look for resources in the catalog, you will come to this, this library catalog. So I'm going to do a search. Actually, today is the Global Day of Digital Humanities. So I'm going to do a search for digital humanities. And I am using Firefox, and I have the Zotero browser plugin installed. I actually have a lot of different plugins up here. So ignore all of them except this one that looks like a little folder icon. So this, and I'm hovering over to it, and it's displaying the words Save to Zotero Primo 2018. So Primo is the name of this library catalog. So if you are, for example, on any kind of database or catalog where you're viewing a list of search results like this, so here we're seeing a variety of different books and articles and book chapters that match my search. The browser plugin will change to this little image of a folder to represent that there are lots of things on the page. So if you click on that, and this again might look slightly differently if you're using a different browser, you will get a little menu box that will allow you to select multiple items to import at once. So you can select whichever items you want to bring in. There's also select all or deselect all, and I will click OK. And then over here on the right-hand side is this little context menu showing that it is saving the items that I just selected to the folder that I had active. You can also choose which folder you want to save things to as you are doing this. I'm just going to save things right now to this Zotero workshop folder. You can even add tags as you are doing this process. So tags are a kind of a way of adding additional information, making things findable for yourself, an additional kind of way of organizing your materials if you choose to use that. And actually what's really wonderful, if you are, for example, searching a library database and you are logged into the campus VPN, I've been having issues with this using my own internet connection. So I'm not currently logged into our local campus VPN, and it's a little late, I didn't click fast enough. What it showed was when it downloaded this, when it imported this citation for this journal article titled Digital Humanities, it found an open access version of the PDF associated with that catalog record. So it automatically pulled in the PDF. So you can kind of control automatically pulling in PDFs if they are available. You can control where Zotero stores those PDFs, if it renames the files, all of those sorts of things. But this is a really fantastic feature of this tool that if you are logged in, for example, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate this over here in JSTOR. So if I may or may not be currently, JSTOR may or may not know that I'm associated with UCR. Again, I'm having issues with the VPN. If the VPN's turned on, I can access certain things, but I can't access other things. So I have to kind of keep it off for the purposes of this workshop. But for example, in any database or something like JSTOR, again, the little icon should show a folder eventually. If there's a series of search results. Oh, so this is actually not recognizing this is a list of search results. What this did, and this icon is for a web page. So you literally can save any resource online, any web page as a citation. And Zotero will do its best to grab the information about that web page and create a citation. So if we go back over, this was JSTOR search results. That is, I now have a little snapshot of that web page, which is not exactly what I wanted. So I'm actually going to click in to one of these search results. Zotero recognizes that this is an article. It's actually a book chapter, so this is a great example. So if I click on this, it will save it to Zotero Workshop, and it will try to save the full text PDF. And this is what I was just talking about. So I'm not currently logged into the VPN, so JSTOR does not know that I should have access to this. If I was logged in, it would automatically grab that full text PDF in the same way that it grabbed this open access version. But it did bring in this book chapter. And in fact, this is the citation I had sitting in here before we started today. So these are two of the same. And if I go over to duplicate items on the left-hand side, Zotero will prompt me to collapse these into one item. But essentially, even though the icon up here is the icon for article, Zotero did recognize that this is a book chapter, and it tried to bring in, it brought in all the information, of course, that's over here, all the metadata that forms the citation. It did bring all of that in correctly, so we have all of this information in the item details pane. So essentially that's how the browser plugin. And then, yeah, as I was saying, this icon here is just for web page. So you can literally go to any resource online and kind of create a citation easily for that resource by saving it as a web page snapshot. So really, it's a really flexible tool for kind of collecting all sorts of research materials, including archival materials. And I'm going to pop back over into Zotero. So a few other details and ways to get things into Zotero. If you don't want to use that browser plugin or the things that you're looking for, you're not browsing for, online, there are two options for creating new items in here. So the first is this magic wand item. So, or this magic wand icon. And this is the add items by identifier icon. So this is up here and above the central item display pane. So if I click on this magic wand, it will prompt me to enter a unique identifier for any item that I want. So what I'll do is actually grab the ISBN or a unique identifier for, let's try this DOI here. So I'm going to copy this DOI. So this is going to give us actually a third copy of this resource, and I'm going to put that DOI in here, and Zotero is going to go and search for it. So it looks like actually that DOI that I just copied in here was not for the book chapter, but it was for the actual book itself, because I have an ISBN. So yeah, the item type that Zotero found. So Zotero went and searched. It searches a variety of different places. So depending on what kind of identifier you put in, if I put in an ISBN, I can copy that and search for an ISBN. It will search something like WorldCat. So it searches a variety of different places. If you try to automatically, if you use this magic wand icon to go and try and pull in the metadata from just using that unique identifier. So we will notice here that each of these is slightly different because Zotero searched in a slightly different place to gather all these different pieces of information together. So it got all the basics pretty similar, whereas we've got some little bit of weirdness here. This is something I also like to point out. It's never a perfectly clean process. So even, so what I recommend is, as you're kind of pulling things into Zotero, just double checking that all the information was pulled in correctly. Obviously, University of Michigan and Press are not really authors. So I'm going to just delete those from here by clicking on the little minus sign next to that author. So that only one author is, occurring here. Of course, the capitalization is slightly different. So again, but the magic wand icon is a pretty fantastic way to get stuff in if you happen to know the unique identifier for that item. That's the way that you manually create items. Again, this is kind of the last resort because there's so many ways to automatically go and find the citation information and pull it in. But you can use this green plus icon on the toolbar up here. to create a new item manually. So when you do that, you're prompted to kind of choose which type of item it is. There's lots of different item types. So these are just the ones that I've used most recently, or that I've created most recently. But you can create, and in fact, it's worth kind of browsing through here to see which types of information are associated with each of these. Sometimes it's not clear, should I choose for a particular, resource, should I choose letter versus manuscript versus, note? So just take a look at what the, items or what the metadata fields are that are associated with each item type. But yeah, once you click the green plus sign and choose what type of item it is, it will create a blank empty citation, and then you can go ahead and fill out all of that information in here. Questions about any of that so far? So I want to say a few words very briefly about searching in Zotero. So there is a search bar up here. Oh, thank you. So someone in the chat just shared that you were trying to follow along in the web version. Yes, I should have mentioned. I'm demoing the desktop version of Zotero, and it does actually look a little differently. We talked about how there's probably just cosmetic differences between like the Mac version versus the PC version of this, and I'm on PC. But the web version at zotero.org does look a little bit different. It's similar. You'll still have a list of all the items, but the kind of pains in the way I'm describing this interface definitely is different. Great point. Yeah, so Zotero has search capabilities. So this is, again, one of the really fantastic reasons to kind of invest the time in getting all your stuff in here, is kind of making it easier for you to find stuff when you need to. So up here in the search bar, in the toolbar, there is a little search box, and you can actually change the scope of your search quite easily. So there's a bunch of pre-built searches, so you can search everything, and that is what it says it is. It searches all of these metadata fields, so you can search. You can type in any word. I'll demo this. So I want to type in, oh gosh. Type in a word that I think might appear somewhere in my research materials. And so all of these search results, I just searched for everything. So the word SOA, which is what I typed in, might appear in a note that's attached to an item. It might appear in the title. It might even be the author's name, for example. But if you want to kind of limit your search to just title, creator, year, one of those common fields, you can do that. So this is going to drastically reduce, because now it's not searching those notes anymore. Everything includes all the sticky notes and full text PDFs. So I don't believe any of my full text PDFs are on the computer that I'm using right now. But if you did have PDFs in your Zotero instance, it would search those as well with the everything. And then you can also search all fields and tags. So that's if you don't want to search things like full text PDFs, but you just want to search in, all of the different metadata fields in here. We'll look in all of these, as well as notes and tags. So I use tags to kind of, you can really use tags super flexibly, and then that's another additional way that you can use to search. A question in chat: if you upload a PDF using the desktop, that's a great question. Does it automatically upload to the cloud? No. So that's a really key aspect of using Zotero, because I've been talking about how you can just drag and drop and bring in files. And in fact, when you're creating this little button here to create a new item, you can in fact go ahead and pull in a PDF, for example. So this is where you would, you can link to a file or actually bring in a copy of the file, and it will try and automatically retrieve the metadata for that. But Zotero treats, for example, all of these, try to exit out of this search result, all of this information, all of this data, all of the pieces of information that form the citations that are kind of text-based, and as well as all of the text-based notes, you can have as much of that as you want, and that will sync for free across instances if you create a free account. There is a limitation though on the number of files that you can sync for free. So Zotero gives you 30 megabytes of free storage, and then you can, if you want to keep PDFs and then sync those with the cloud, you can either pay for additional storage. I believe they offer it in like a gigabyte or 2 gigabyte chunks. You can also, and I cover this in the advanced workshop that I gave last year, and I can provide a link to that particular YouTube video. There are a variety of ways where you can kind of link to stuff if your PDFs live in a Google Drive or if your PDFs live on your computer. There's different strategies to kind of work around the Zotero storage limitations. But yeah, PDFs will not automatically upload if you have them here in your local instance. And in fact, let me go ahead and show real quick. If you go into Edit on the toolbar and then Preferences, this is where you're going to be able to kind of set all of those preferences and settings that relate to syncing your library, syncing your file attachments. So I have it set to sync attachment files using Zotero. There are other options. I can turn this off if I don't want to use my, my 30 megabytes, right? Linked files will not sync. Linked files don't actually live in Zotero. So that's the kind of key difference between storing a copy of a PDF in Zotero versus linking to that PDF. And you'll want to use the link when you're storing things in, for example, Box, Dropbox, Google Drive. So you can, and again, I'll refer you to the Advanced Zotero workshop. You can change your syncing settings and set it up so that you are pointing to, where your PDFs live. And then in that sense, you're not syncing the actual physical files, you're just syncing the information about the files. I hope that makes sense. It gets very complicated very quickly talking about syncing, and that's why I offered that advanced workshop. But there's all kinds of settings that you'll probably want to poke around in here, particularly related to dealing with PDFs and the files that you're using Zotero to kind of organize and store. Okay, and then very briefly before we wrap up, how do you get citations out of Zotero? So there's a number of ways. You can literally copy and paste. So you can right click on any item that you have and create a bibliography from that item. You'll be prompted the first time that you do that to choose which citation style you want to use. And then you can choose if you're outputting it, of course, as like a footnote or an endnote or an in-text citation versus like a works cited section, your actual bibliography. Of course, different citation styles have, like Chicago is going to treat notes and bibliographies differently than APA. And you can choose how to output that. So you can copy it to the clipboard. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I will just pull up a Word document and pull that over here. So I just have Word open. I'm going to paste, and that took the citation right here and generated the bibliography using, I think I had APA selected as the citation style. So that's one way of really quickly getting stuff out. You can also, for example, create an entire folder of all the works that you're citing in a particular article or whatever, paper. And then you can either select all of them and do the same thing, right click and generate a bibliography from the items. You can also generate a bibliography from an entire collection. So this is a way, you might want to use collections to organize the sources you're citing in a paper. And again, you choose the citation style. You can always set your default in your settings, your preferences, and then choose how you're outputting them, depending on where you're copying and pasting them. They even have HTML if you're copying stuff and putting it in a website. And let's see. You can also, of course, if you're using a word processor plugin, I'm not going to demonstrate that because it looks different for every single word processor, and not everyone uses Microsoft Word. But if you're using a word processor, you can use the Zotero. I guess I will demo it because I have it open. So I have Zotero installed for Microsoft Word, and this is going to kind of look different depending on which thing you're using. But you can essentially use this built-in tool to insert and edit citations and then automatically populate, your bibliography at the end. Yeah, again, you select which citation style and you can kind of customize that process. It's showing me that for the first time because I hadn't, in this document, I hadn't selected a citation style. And yeah, so you can kind of search your library right in here. I'll just grab this book. So because I think I had, now I forget if I had Chicago or APA or which citation style I had, I just inserted an in-text citation for that book. And then, I'm typing, you got your whole paper or whatever. At the end, you can generate a bibliography from all those citations, wherever your cursor is. So not very exciting with one citation, but that's kind of how that works in Microsoft Word. So questions about getting things out of Zotero or anything else that we talked about today? Let me scroll back up because I know folks had other specific things you were interested in. And so I hope I answered some of the questions I'm seeing in here about, creating footnotes and generating bibliographies or generating this database of citations. A request to repeat how I got the Zotero tab into my Word document. Great question. So I installed that. If you go to Zotero.org and you go to the download page, actually no, the download page is just going to prompt you to install the actual tool and then the browser connector. But at the bottom of this page is a little section called plugins. So I already have that tab open over here, but these are all the plugins that are available for Zotero. There's really a lot, and you kind of have to pop over here and click on word processor and writing integration. And this is where you can download the plugins for Word, for LibreOffice, for Google Docs, for LaTeX, etc. So this is the site that you would go to choose your plugin. So for Word, I would go here, and then I would install it. There's installation instructions. There's usually a download button somewhere on this page, how to set it up, how to use it. Again, it's different for each word processor, but that's how I got that Zotero button in my Microsoft Word, was by installing this plugin. Great question. Any other last minute questions? I will just pop back over here to call attention to the fact that I am available to answer questions beyond just this hour. This recording will be made available and posted on the library's YouTube page. But if you have questions at any point, I'll stick around for a few minutes. Happy to answer questions. Actually, before folks hop off, I do want to just, if you're able to take 1 minute and fill out, this is a super, super brief 2-minute, or not even 2 minute, 1 minute survey with 2 questions on it, just to help us know, what sorts of things are good to include in these workshops and maybe what might help you learn more effectively, or if there's other topics you want to learn about. So thank you if you have a minute to just take that evaluation very quickly. But yeah, feel free to get in touch, and you can always go to the library website and click on Ask a Librarian if you have additional questions to follow up. So thank you.